Now, I want you to sit there and take a minute and be totally honest with yourself. And just think. Do you feel like you're being lied to? Government secrets!
The government has been lying to us for years. They might even be experimenting on you. Today, we have 3 crazy government conspiracies that might just be true. Now, I know we've all seen America's favorite movie from the 1990s, Men in Black with Will Smith. But did you know that it's actually based on a real thing? The Men in Black are a supposed government agency that have been cited countless times over the years by eyewitnesses. Their whole job is to cover up extraterrestrial knowledge that may be leaking out into the public. Now, Messiah has covered one of these stories before on a previous episode. It's a story about a man named Harold Dahl who's seen a few UFOs over the Puget Sound in Washington. But I want to touch on something a little more less known, something that may have photograph evidence. In the 1960s in Solway Firth, which is between Scotland and England, a man named Jim Templeton was traveling down the road with his daughter in the car when he spots a perfect flower field in the distance. So they pull over and get out of the car. Jim recently just got a brand new Kodak camera he wanted to test out, and he thought this would be perfect to shoot a photo of his daughter sitting in this flower field. So he instructs his daughter to sit down, pick a flower, play with it. Jim snaps a photo. They enjoy the rest of their day. When Jim gets the film developed, what he's seen is unexplainable. Right behind his daughter, sitting in the flower field, maybe about 5 or 6 feet, is a perfect silhouette of a man standing with his arms at his hips, looking off into the sky, wearing what looks to be some sort of spacesuit. Jim is clearly dumbfounded by this. He has no idea what's going on. Nobody else was in that field when he took the photo. So he calls Kodak, the manufacturer of the film and the camera. Kodak instructs him to send the picture in, so he does. He sends the picture to Kodak, and they verify that it's a real person in the photo. They said it's not a defect in the camera. This isn't some sort of artifact we've seen in our film before. This looks like a man in the photo. This photo has not been doctored. A few days after that, Jim gets a very strange phone call. It's a call coming from an Australian missile launch facility, someone claiming to be one of the directors there. They called him because they received an anonymous tip that Jim had captured some sort of spaceman-looking object in a photograph. They wanted to question him because they said they have CCTV footage of 2 identical-looking figures on their cameras at their missile launch facility. Jim has no idea how this person that claimed to be from a missile launch facility knew about his photo or what was in it. But Jim has no idea what to make of this phone call, so he hangs up. Now, it was later found out that the missiles that were launched out of this Australian launch facility were manufactured only 20 miles from where Jim took the photo in the flower field. Could the phone call Jim received be part of the Men in Black agency? If that sounds strange, listen to this. A United States doctor named Herbert Hopkins. He studied UFO history, UFO knowledge, alien artifacts, eyewitness accounts, crash sites, you name it. He had a library of paperwork on this stuff. He gets an anonymous phone call one night. It says, somebody has just been near a UFO crash site and they have something to bring him. It was either a photograph or a physical piece of the crash, something like that. The phone call was very garbled and Herbert could barely hear him. But Herbert gives the caller his address and says, bring it over. I want to see it. A few hours later, there's a knock at Herbert's door. Herbert opens the door up and there's a tall man in an all black suit with a black fedora on. Herbert notices that this man barely has any eyebrows and his facial expression is very stoic. There's just no emotion on his face. This man invites himself in, walks right into Herbert's office and says something extremely weird. He looks at Herbert and he goes, there's 2 pennies in your pocket. Pull one out. At that moment, Herbert had no idea what he was talking about, but he was immediately scared because Herbert knew that he had 2 pennies in his left pocket. and it seemed that Herbert was reaching into his pocket and pulling one single penny out against his will. He was just kind of going with it. So Herbert produces one of the 2 pennies out of his pocket in his hand and shows it to the man wearing the black suit. The man in the black suit looks at the penny in Herbert's hand, and in Herbert's own words, the penny vanishes from existence, slowly disappears right out of his hand. In rapid succession, right after the penny disappears, the man wearing the black suit asks Herbert if he's heard of a man named Barney Hill. Herbert immediately recognized the name because Barney Hill was a man from the area who had recently claimed to have been abducted by a UFO. Barney went on a series of media runs claiming what he experienced, what happened while he was aboard the UFO, and what the beings looked like that took him. But Herbert had heard a rumor that Barney had died recently. So that's what Herbert said to the man in black. He said, "I heard that guy died." The man in black, still emotionless, staring at Herbert, says, "He no longer has a heart, just like you no longer have a penny," implying that whatever power or whatever technology was used to make this penny disappear out of Herbert's hand may have stopped Barney's heart and killed him and prevented him from talking. The man in black immediately after that instructs Herbert to burn whatever research he has, tear it up, light it on fire, throw it away. Before all of this, he said when that man gets here and gives him whatever he's given him, to destroy that as well. After that night, just as he was instructed, destroyed all of his documents containing knowledge of everything he's collected over the years about UFOs and alien life forms, maintaining that the man in black was from a government agency. Now, we have an eyewitness account, we have photographical evidence, but what if I told you that we had video evidence of the government agency known as the Men in Black existing? In April of 2012, a Canadian hotel manager seen what he thought was a UFO crash. He thought it maybe looked like a meteor at first, but it got bigger and bigger as it approached faster and faster to Earth. He could clearly make out that this was a saucer-looking object in the sky. And as it broke into the Earth's atmosphere, it caught on fire, and it made a weird glowing flame around it, and he could see it hit the Earth with no explosion, just a dim light. Being shocked at what he's seen that night, he does not go to work to manage his hotel the next day. He stays home.
I would stay home too, bro. Are you kidding me? He's like, oh, make sure I gotta clock in the morning after that crazy night.
While he's at home, he receives a phone call from one of the employees at his hotel. He's saying, "Sir, we got 2 guys here asking about you. They're really adamant about speaking to you. Seems very important. They won't go away. They're kind of causing a scene in the lobby here." And the manager goes, "What do you mean causing a scene? Is anybody hurt? What's going on? Are they breaking anything?" And the employee goes, "No, they're actually very still. They're just a little unsettling looking." And the manager goes, "What? I'm staying home. I just tell them I'm not there today. I can't be there today." So the employee says, "Okay," and hangs up. The next day, the manager goes in to work at his hotel, talks to the same employee and says, "Hey, what was that all about yesterday? Who are those guys looking for me?" The employee says, "You got to see this." So he brings them over to the CCTV room where they have all the footage from the hotel lobby. And he plays them a video. And it's of 2 extremely tall, dark dressed men, black suits, black hats, and pale skin. The hotel employee tells the manager some of the same stuff that we've heard already, that the men barely had eyebrows, they had no facial expressions, they had pale skin, and they almost seemed to have identical faces. Almost like they were the same person. They were very adamant about finding out the manager's address and what he's seen, and this employee had no idea about what the manager seen the night before. So the employee says, what did you see? They kept asking what you seen. I didn't know what they were talking about. And the manager said, "I seen a UFO, I think. I don't know what it was." Now, since then, the hotel manager has never seen these strange men again. However, this video has been released to the internet and is widely popular now. Some of the only video evidence we have of the supposed men in black. So what do you think? A lot of these stories suggest the men in black are real, but also that the men in black may not even be human.
Sounds like alien space agents to me.
Yeah, like reptilians. Are they like shapeshift into humans and they're just trying to keep their identity? Dude, I could go on for hours.
They like sound like their facial structure like sounds alien like, you know?
Yeah, so all of these stories say that their face, they're almost like upsetting to look at.
I mean, I also don't like looking at crackheads either, but
It's true. Could be some crackheads in really nice suits.
They're like aliens.
What did you see?
see the void in their eyes. There's nothing there.
Their eyebrows are gone from a meth explosion accident.
Or they shaved it off.
Or they're just like holding the crack torch too close to their face.
Singed it.
Confirmed, the men in black might be crackheads. I don't know, man. Maybe they're doing experiments on us. Who knows? Speaking of experiments, Moose, what do you got?
I do have an experiment.
Like one in college?
Ooh, those were the glory days, huh?
This is the best experiments.
Those experimented a lot.
Have you?
I didn't know what to say with this.
Oh yeah, experiment all the time, man.
Now let me ask you guys a question. Do you like to sleep?
As much as I can.
I like to sleep too, okay? What if I told you or prevented you from needing to sleep?
If there were no adverse effects and I felt just as good as I do when I sleep, I would choose not to sleep.
There's not enough hours in the day.
Right.
Get more stuff done.
Exactly. Imagine living 2 whole lives. You get a whole nother life.
Technically 1/3, but to each their own.
So that sounds like a great in theory, right? So in 1940, the Russian government was like, hey, this would be really cool if we could figure out a way that we don't have to sleep. And what they designed was a gas that they thought if you took it in small doses would prevent your body's reaction for the feel to need to sleep. Obviously, as you can imagine, it seems a little bit risky here. So they took 5 people that they deemed enemies of Russia and decided to put them in a room and put the gas into the room and see what happens. So now the first 3 days didn't go that bad. The prisoners were staying up after being told by the people running the experiments that if they cooperate with the experiment and do not sleep, that they will be released within 30 days. Mind you, these guys were prisoners of Russia. So they're telling them, hey, if you follow this experiment, we'll let you guys go home after 30 days.
It's not a bad deal.
All of their actions and dialogue were recorded during this time, being wired up with microphones. So the people outside obviously could hear what was happening without having to go in and expose themselves to that gas, because at the time it's an experiment, they don't know what's going to happen. Within that 30-day period, the conversation between the 5 men in there were pretty normal, talking about opening up to each other, talking about some different things, how they got there, etc. And after about 4 days or so, the conversations began to get a little bit darker. By the 5th day, paranoia began to set in. Now we know in present day time, it's kind of true, around 5 days of not being able to sleep, you start seeing and hearing things. Instead of conversating amongst each other, they oddly began whispering to themselves into the microphone. Many of the prisoners became desperate and thought that if they told all, that they would be potentially released early. And at this point, they were extremely desperate, either wanting just to get out or just to be able to go to bed again. Now, the 10th day is when the screaming started.
What?
For 3 hours straight, prisoners would scream while running back and forth in the room as loud as they can. After screaming with such intensity for so long, when one of the prisoners began to talk in the microphone, only little squeaks came out, which the doctors on site determined that that person actually tore their vocal cords from screaming so hard and for so long.
Oh my God, I didn't even know you could tear those.
As this experiment continued further and further, the prisoners' conditions began to worsen and worsen, eventually not hearing anything coming from the cell. And around the 14th day, they did something unplanned. They explained again to the prisoner, if they cooperated, that they would actually be released. And at that time, a voice came over the intercom and said,
"We do not want to be freed."
What the hell?
On the 15th day, the experiment staff decided to take the gas out of the room and actually fill the room again with fresh air to see what would happen. The prisoners, at that point, began to beg for the gas to be turned back on. Soldiers at that point went into the room. The food that was left in there has not been touched in days. And when the soldiers began looking at the bodies, realized that chunks of flesh were ripped out from the legs, arms, neck, torso of these prisoners. The cell was also flooded with 4 inches of water because they plugged the drain and clogged it and then flooded the room. After further observation, the doctors determined that actually most of the wounds, the chunks of skin being ripped off, were actually self-inflicted. And it was described as being so brutal that even the most experienced soldiers didn't want to be in the room or even near those bodies. While in the room, the one alive, breathing prisoner began to act irate. Once they had him detained, they asked him, "Why'd you do that? Why are you freaking out?" Which, again, kind of seems weird. He hasn't been sleeping for 15 days. And his response was,
"I must remain awake."
The Russian government decided at that point that it was time to put it all to wraps. They decided that they were going to actually kill the last remaining prisoner.
I guess they can just do that to Russia.
It's like a secret experiment, so
Yeah.
nobody knows you're doing anything, and these are random people you captured. So again, before they kill him, they asked them, the remaining prisoner, one more time. They asked them, "What are you?" And at that point, the prisoner responded,
"Have you forgotten so easily? I am you."
One of the officers got really angry and decided to actually start choking out the remaining prisoner. And right before that prisoner ended up fully being choked out, his last words said was,
"So close to freedom."
Obviously, there's no documentation from this, so this is all alleged. But please let us know your thoughts. But this story really gives me goosebumps.
Dude, I feel like Russia can just get away with it, with anything, just because of how like lawless they are. The sleep experiment, they could just off a bunch of prisoners and turn them into like crazy self-mutilating sleepless monsters.
Well, that actually reminds me, my story is actually about how the US gets away with everything that they want. Now, I want you to sit there and take a minute, be totally honest with yourself, and just think. Do you feel like you're being lied to? Majority of the population would pretty much agree that their government is lying to them. And I have a true, real story about how the CIA was planning for that. So a bunch of CIA documents were released about some of the weirdest, most disturbed operations that they had going on, such as MK Ultra or other assassination attempts. Now, this operation was called Operation Northwoods. What Operation Northwoods was an uncovered CIA document revealing a false flag Cuban attack on American soil. Now, this was during the whole American-Cuban, I guess you could call it a Cold War. There really wasn't a war, but Fidel Castro is probably the #1 targeted person for assassination attempts, which they've tried multiple times to do it. He just wouldn't die. Now let's do a little history lesson if you don't know about Cuba. So back in the day, Cuba was pushing around a bunch of socialist bullshit, and America was like... And America was not having it. They're like, yo, we democracy, what up? There's a bunch of dudes screaming eagle over here, and they're across the pond pushing that socialist communism agenda over there. And we weren't having it, dog. And so kind of hyped up a lot of tension, especially when Cuba was reaching out to Russia for aid. So going back to these documents, the documents would pretty much go over multiple ways on how to set up a false flag attack within American soil. Like I said before, these false flags would detail events such as blowing up naval ships, blowing up planes in the air, blaming it on Cuba for doing it. And the whole plan was to bring America and rally them and give them justification to go to war. There was one particular plan that stood out from all the rest because there was such extreme detail. And I'm assuming it was probably their favorite plan based on how much detail was written in there. Or maybe it was just some guy's like passion project and he was like getting a hard on for writing this. It was probably that. Now the details of this plan, let's break it down here. Plan was to take a civilian plane and fly it out to Florida. Just some people having a good old vacation, going to spring break, having the time of their lives. Now the only problem with this is that the plane would not be filled with civilians. The plane would be filled with CIA operatives dressed as people, pretty much everyday civilians, and they would be flown off to Florida. Now midway through the flight, that plane would detour to a military base, and an exact copy of that plane would swap places with it and continue on course to Florida. However, this swap plane was a drone. It was remotely piloted by someone somewhere else. There was no people on board this plane at all. Now, continuing on its flight to Florida, it ultimately would meet its demise and be detonated with explosives. Now, with the loss of civilian lives and a clear enemy, it would give justification to go to war with Cuba. Not only giving justification for the military to go to war, also giving support of the American population as well. However, this ultimately did not go into effect. This was put on JFK's desk. He looked over the numerous amounts of operations on the Cuban War and how to pretty much engage in war, and he was not having it. He did not want the American people to start another war. He was not for this at all. And not long after turning this down, he gave his famous speech, told the American people that there was a hidden group of people trying to control them. And soon after that speech, he was assassinated. Now, it's speculation if this was connected to JFK's assassination, but this false flag sounds eerily familiar with some other, let's say, American attacks on American soil. Maybe some that might involve weapons of mass destruction that apparently never existed, or some naval bases on an island that had planes flown into them. I'm not going to say that it was, but things don't smell the way they're telling us it's smelling.
What's crazy about that too is around the JFK thing is, you guys ever heard of the Gulf of Tonkin?
No.
It was like, apparently, if I remember correctly, Lyndon B. Johnson used the Gulf of Tonkin, which was a gulf by the country of Vietnam. And they said that they sunk one of the American submarines or ship, and we used that incident to go fight the Vietnam War, and that never happened.
Oh, yeah, I have heard about this. It was just an excuse.
Excuse to go over there and fight the Vietnam War. That was right after JFK died, too.
Within the CIA documents, there were actual cases of domestic terrorism, like real domestic terrorism. They obviously did not want to do that because there would be civilian lives lost, real civilian lives.
If you want to help spread the word on what the government's really doing out there, hit that like, comment down below, make sure you hit a sub, tell your friends and family about us, help spread the word. We love every single one of you. Please join the Discord to share any personal experiences of your own, or if you have any suggestions about future episodes. That does it for us. Be out.